Hello everyone, welcome to the second in our series of the University of Bradford annual mock competition. We have with us a team of students who are all fired up to go, prepared, witnesses, and it's our real live drama in the Lady Hill courtroom at the University of Bradford. We're grateful to our sponsors, Proctor and Hobbs, who is sponsoring this event for the second year running. It's an event where we hope that our students will have the opportunity to practice real-world legal skills, apply principles of law to a live case, and practice their advocacy skills as well. On our part, we're just going to really enjoy watching them and cheering them on. And at the end of the day, the winner gets to take home a smart car. For me, that is the really brilliant part. When I was at university, there weren't that many opportunities where the prize for whatever event that you did was a car. So I think Proctor and Hobbs have been really generous with their offer, and we're really grateful to them. But I think this once again goes to show our commitment as a school, together with our partners, to ensure that our students get the best of experiences while studying. Because at the end of the day, the practice of law is about the legal skills, not just the knowledge. So I'm very pleased to welcome everyone. The judges all seated and ready to say welcome to the 2022 annual Bradford mock trial competition, and may the best person win. Cheers.
Very good, thank you. Welcome to the Lady Hill Court for today's hearing. Just making sure that we have our paperwork in order for today. We've got the score sheet and the particulars. Thank you very much. There we go. Okay, so yes, we are here. We will be introduced to the case by our prosecution. So I won't give any sort of overarching introduction to the case itself. We will be hearing from 4 witnesses in today's trial in the matter of Crown and Fran San here in the Lady Hill Court of the University of Bradford. So without any further ado from myself, I will invite our prosecution briefly to introduce the case. But firstly, if we could please, our clerk, if we could swear in our defendant for today's trial. Is our defendant in the court today, Fran San, please? Hello, thank you.
Please stand at the front and please repeat this after me. I, Fran San, do solemnly, sincerely and truly declare and affirm that the evidence that I shall give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. And if I could just confirm your address, please.
My address is 5 Coronation Street, Bradford, BD7 1CT.
Thank you. And how do you plead?
Not guilty.
Thank you. That's all for now.
Thank you. Right, the particulars of the offence that you have pled not guilty to, just for the purposes of the court, that on the 13th of December of last year, 2021, that you, Fran San, did dishonestly appropriate property belonging to a Mr. David Platt, with the intention of permanently depriving Mr. Platt of his property, contrary to Section 1 of the Theft Act of 1968. You have pled not guilty, thank you for that. So I will turn to our prosecution to open the case, please. Thank you.
Your Honor and members of the jury, I am here today to represent my claimant of this case, David Saint. The facts of the case are David Saint recently planned on visiting his daughter in December of 2021, who had recently moved to Australia. While he planned this trip, he needed someone to check up on his cats and water his plants, as well as attend to his house and keep its condition. This is where the defendant comes in. Fran San enters the picture as Mr. Saint had asked her to watch over his cats and tend to his plants while he was away. Given their history together, David had no reason to believe that there would be anything tampered with by the time he arrived. While she was there, however, on the 13th of December, she attended to his cats and watered his plants, but she also helped herself to some items of property that were in David Saint's home. This included Mr. Saint's telephone landline, which she assumed wrongfully that David had free mobile calls. However, this was of course not true. Not only that, but she also opened my client's whiskey bottle, which she had kept and has been in his possession for over 50 years and has a high market price on it. The defendant also decided, once again, to take the newspapers and recycle them and do as she pleased with them. Once he returned from the trip, he received a telephone bill of phone calls that occurred while he was away, which obviously meant that he could not have made these calls because he was out of the country. When he confronted the defendant, she admitted to taking them and throwing them into the recycling bin, which brings us to why we are all here today. This clearly upset my client, and it's understandable why he could not understand why his property was tampered with. Today, the prosecution has charged the defendant with theft, contrary to Section 1 of the Theft Act of 1968. In today's trial, the prosecution will prove that on the 13th of December 2021, Fran Sand dishonestly appropriated property belonging to my client, David Saint. At the end of this trial, you will ask yourself whether to consider the situation to be, as I explained, to be theft. There will be only one answer, and so members of the jury, I advise you to choose wisely. Thank you. That's it for the prosecution.
Okay, thank you. Yes, yeah, that was quite clear. Would you like to call your first witness?
Yes. I'd like to call David Saint.
Okay. David Saint, you're in the court. Thank you. Just wait to be sworn in.
David, if you could confirm your full name to the court, please.
Mr. David Saint.
And your address, please.
1 Campus Road, BD7 1HR.
Right, thank you. If you could repeat these words after me. I, David Saint,
I, David Saint,
do solemnly, sincerely and truly
do solemnly, sincerely and truly
declare and affirm
declare and affirm
that the evidence I shall give
that the evidence I shall give
shall be the truth,
that shall be the truth,
the whole truth,
the whole truth,
and nothing but the
and
truth.
nothing but the truth.
You may be seated. Your
Okay.
witness.
Hi.
Can you tell the court your occupation? Your occupation.
An accountant.
Oh, sorry, I couldn't hear you. Can you briefly explain what occurred on December of 2021?
I essentially allowed a friend of mine, someone I considered to be a friend, namely Fran Ann, to tend to my cats, my plants and the rest of my house whilst I was absent, as I was visiting my daughter in Australia. When I came back, certain items were missing or were different from how I left them, and because of that leads us to
Just for clarification, do you travel often, or is this one of the few times that you do travel?
I don't travel that often now. This is the first time that I was allowed to visit my daughter, obviously due to Corona lockdown and stuff.
Just for evidence sake, could you explain describe how many cats and how many plants you had Fran look after while you were away?
So I'm just going to have to check my witness statement. 2 cats and fair few plants, yeah.
In terms of taking care of them while you're away, do you often ask your neighbors or your family members to care for them?
Well, as I said, I don't travel particularly often, so it's not really the case where I have to have this situation arise. Nonetheless, whenever I do, generally I'm travelling with family, so I do ask friends, yeah.
When you asked Fran to watch over your cats and your plants, did you ever mention that you had an expectation, for example, for anything to be moved around, or if she was able to use whichever she pleads?
I think that we had a brief conversation whereby I said essentially you're welcome to things within reason, but I feel that she's broke that remit, and that's what brings us here today. At the end of the day, if you want to go have a glass of water, that's fine. But if you want to fuss open bottles of champagne and whatever, whiskey, then that's a little bit out of the remit of that.
Can I ask when you noticed that things were out of the ordinary, or things were missing or tampered with?
Initially, I didn't realise, but as maybe a few days passed or something or other, I noticed that particular things were missing. It was mainly when the phone bill came through that I realised. I can't remember the exact nature of time, how long it took for that to come through, but I believe it was at the end of the month, and when it came through I noticed that I hadn't made those calls, and that's what initially sparked my interest into what else had been changed or missing.
So you never thought that it could have been you?
Well, initially I thought, oh, maybe I have messed up a little bit, maybe I have called someone by mistake or something or other, but that's my nature, and it's just me not expecting that up front. So, long story short, I believe that, realistically speaking, it was something that I initially put blame on myself for, yes, but when 2 and 2 started added up together and I wasn't even in the country at the time, that's when my suspicions started peaking.
How did you react when you saw the telephone bill?
In terms of what I said to Fran, or in terms of how I felt?
You could talk about how you felt towards Fran.
I mean, at the end of the day, I still consider her a friend, but by the same token, you should pay your dues, essentially. You know, if I had gone to her house and took £300 of stuff, I'd expect to pay for that. That's all I'm trying to say here. It's nothing personal, but by the same token, you should obviously pay your dues.
Yeah. In terms of the whiskey bottle that I believe Fran had opened and taken a drink out of, did you ever plan to open that anytime soon, or were you planning on keeping it in the state it was before it was opened?
Seeing as it was a 50-year-old bottle, I was planning on keeping it for quite some time. Maybe a special celebration, maybe when my daughter finished university, something or other. It wasn't meant for now. No.
Okay. So in terms of your relationship with Fran, would you say you're friends?
Yeah.
Alright. At any point, did you ever have a situation like this happen with Fran or another friend happen?
I'm not sure.
Okay, that's fine. I'm aware that your neighbors also, from time to time, would take care of your crabs and plants as well. Did anything arise similar to this when?
Nothing to this level, no.
So, did you ever confront the defendant about your queries on why your newspapers were missing, and as well as the whiskey bottle and the telephone bill?
Yeah, I tried to obviously speak first. Obviously, no one jumped straight to the court, but nothing was getting resolved, which leads us to today.
And can you explain how she reacted when you confronted her?
Very dismissive, just not taking accountability for anything.
To my understanding, you also publish in the newspaper.
Yes.
How long have you been publishing in the newspaper?
Quite some time now, a couple of years.
Does any of your close relations know that you're a journalist and that you publish in the newspaper often?
Well, I am an accountant by nature, but people do know that I do publish stuff in the newspaper occasionally, yeah.
Did Fran ever take your newspapers previously, or is this?
This was the first time, I believe, yeah.
Would you say there was a normal understanding to collect the newspapers or to leave them alone where they were delivered?
I can't recall. I think I thought that common sense would have that I would just want my newspapers there. If I hadn't cancelled my subscription, it's probably for a purpose. But nonetheless, if she didn't understand that, that's perhaps something that we can both take slight accountability for. But I would just assume that common sense would obviously determine the fact that it would be left there as it is.
I think we're speculating here, so if we could, rephrase if you continue with this line of questioning.
I was trying
speculation if we could.
I was trying to ask my client if there was any previous occurrences where.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. But you're asking, on what understanding would, in general, people determine, a pile of newspapers. Yeah, the ownership of a pile of newspapers. Was that the line of questioning?
More that if. Yeah, kind of like that. If
okay.
someone was, let alone
just be careful with.
newspapers.
Yeah. Don't stray into speculation here, please.
But yeah, no
Thank
further
you.
questions.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Well, sorry to break you off at the end there. Yes, to our defence, if you would like to cross-examine us with. Thank you. Thank you.
Mr. Saint, how are you today?
Good, thank you. And you?
I'm okay, thank you. So you said you're an accountant, is that correct?
Yes.
Cool. I'd just like you to first, if you could, explain your relationship with the accused.
Been friends for quite a few years, live on the same street, occasionally play poker, other games. Yeah, fairly cordial relationship.
Mm-hmm. Would you say that you were close friends or?
Fairly close, yeah.
Fairly close friends, okay. Can I ask why you chose the accused to look after your house, tend to your plants, rather than choosing anyone else?
I had it on authority from other neighbours that she would be a good fit for the job.
Okay. So you'd say that she has a good reputation?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fine. Okay. Now, can I ask you what responsibilities exactly you gave the accused when you went away?
Tending to my plants and feeding my cats were the main two.
Okay. Following on from that, would you have also expected that your house would have been left in the same condition that you left it in?
Yeah.
Okay. So, if there was any mess created in the house during that time, would you have expected that she would have tended to that as well?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Now, so the main reason why you wanted her to tend to your house was for your cats. So can you first confirm how many cats you have?
2.
2 cats, okay. That's fine. And normally, how do your cats enter your property?
Cat flap.
The cat flap. And that coming from the front garden?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Now, I just want to move on now in terms of the whiskey bottle. In this whiskey bottle, were you keeping this as an investment, or were you planning to open this bottle soon? Because you are saying that you've kept this bottle for 50 years. That's
No,
pretty long
I haven't kept the
time.
bottle for 50 years, sorry. It's a 50-year-old aged whiskey.
It's a 50-year-old age whiskey. Okay.
So I was saving it for a momentous occasion, not going to Australia whilst I was not there, essentially. You know, it was meant to be for perhaps a daughter's graduation, maybe a wedding, something or other. It was not meant for just an everyday thing. I wouldn't call it an investment, but I'd say it was for more of an occasion.
And this bottle, did you keep it along with all your other bottles, the cheaper bottles, the bottles that you use more regularly, or did you keep it in a separate cabinet?
As in my witness statement, I don't know if you've seen, it's kind of in a kind of dusty corner, so that it's kind of kept separate away from the other ones. It's not really in the same location as the other ones now.
Okay, it's just that in your statement it says that it's in the drinks bar. Is there a separate compartment to the drinks bar?
So it's essentially you've got one shelf, like one set of shelves here, then another set of shelves. They're all within the same drinks kind of region, but they're separate shelves.
Okay, that's fine. I just want to pick up here. You mentioned about if she was wanting to drink some water while she was in the house, that you wouldn't begrudge her having some water. Now, in the same way, and I just want to put this to you, if one of your friends, one of your guests was feeling a bit down, would you generally offer them a glass of alcohol?
Personally, no, because I don't believe that alcohol is the solver of problems.
Okay, cool. And if any of your friends or families that came to your house, would you expect that if there was any mess created, they clean it up, or would you expect that, you know, they leave it for you to clean?
It depends on what particular context. If I'm throwing a party and there's plenty of people there, it's my responsibility the next day, clean everything up. If it's a little gathering, whatever, you're eating from your own plate or whatever, leave it in the sink or something. I wouldn't expect it to be spick and span, but I would expect it to be reasonable if I'd left you in my house to leave it in the same state that it was.
Okay, that's fine. Now, you said that you had a good relationship before these events occurred. Would you say that the relationship has been soured quite considerably?
Yes, because of the dismissive nature of the approach after you've made the mistake. Not you personally, sorry. The accused has made the mistake.
Thank you, Your Honour. No further questions.
Okay. Could I just clarify one thing? Sorry. In terms of the question about leaving a mess, there's no evidence in this that your defendant created a mess in that sense, or?
In the sense, this line of questioning is because if my defendant had not touched the the newspaper, sorry.
Right.
And
I see.
If
okay, thank you.
Okay,
Okay.
you understand.
That's very well. Thank you. To our prosecution, do you have any questions of re-examination? Yep. Try and keep them to questions that we heard in cross-examination.
Yeah.
Things arising from cross-examination. Thank you.
I understand that you tried to reach a consensus with the defendant. Did you ever try to stress your annoyance of what you came to see at December of 2021?
Yeah, of course. I try to be as nice as I could. I understand that it's a rough situation that they're in, but by the same token, facts are facts, and you can't always hide from the truth.
So, per the re-examination, do you ever offer whiskey or any kind of beverage while someone is watching your cats and plants? Like, do you allow anyone to touch any of your beverages while you're away?
Within reason, yeah. But obviously, an alcoholic beverage is something a little bit more than a bottle of Coke, for example. It's a different ball game almost. So that's the kind of reason why I'm particularly stressed about this situation.
Okay. No further questions.
Just one more. Sorry, Mr. Saint. You valued the property at around £300, if I heard correctly.
The bottle of whiskey, and then in addition, the phone call being £60-something.
Okay.
And then the newspaper subscription altogether, yes, around £300.
Okay. Thank you. I'm happy with that. Thank you. You may.
Sit back there.
Sorry.
Shall I take a seat back there?
Yes, please. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
For me to see it. Okay. Prosecution, if you would like to call your... Whenever you're ready, to call your...
I'd like to call Ife Abdan.
Ife,
Okay.
please. Before you sit down, if you could please confirm your full name to the court.
Ife Ibadan.
And your address, please.
1 Campus Road, Bradford.
Okay, if you could repeat after me. I, Ife Obani
I, Ife Ibadan.
Ibadan, I beg your pardon. I do solemnly, sincerely and truly
I do solemnly, sincerely and truly
declare and affirm
declare and affirm
that the evidence I shall give
that the evidence I shall give
shall be the truth,
shall be the truth,
the whole truth,
the whole truth,
and nothing but the truth.
and nothing but the truth.
Thank you. You may be seated.
Thank you.
Your witness.
Can you confirm to the court your occupation?
I'm an accountant.
Were you working before the pandemic or during the pandemic? Roughly, how long have you been working as an accountant?
About 5 years.
Can you explain your relationship with my client, David Singh?
I've been renting a room in David's house since 2019, when I just arrived in the UK.
What kind of relationship do you have with the defendant? Because I am led to believe that you guys are all neighbors. Is that correct?
Yes, there's, we do have a cordial relationship, I would say.
Sorry, could I ask a little bit more volume? I'm a little hard of hearing up here.
Oh, sorry about that.
Thank you very much. Sorry.
We have a cordial relationship, I would say.
Thank you.
Can you tell the court where you were during December of 2021?
I had to go back home to Africa on a family visit. So I was away from the UK at the time.
So you're away with family at the time?
Yes, please.
Do you travel out of the country often, or you decided that December was just the perfect time to visit family?
Well, I hadn't had any opportunity of traveling before then, just because I'd moved to the UK recently, and then there was the pandemic and all that. So yeah.
You said that my client is a landlord, or you live close to my client. I just asked for clarification. Are you his neighbor, or you?
I live in the house with
live
him,
with
so
him.
I'm his tenant, I would say. Yeah.
Okay, sorry, I was just asking for clarification.
Thank you.
Would you say that you're the sole person to look after his cats and plants if he is away, whenever that may be?
Well, usually yes, because he's been a very good landlord, and we have a good relationship as well. So I try to be around if he's going away, so that I can assist with looking after the plants and the cats. Yes.
In reference to your trip to Africa, when did you return?
So I returned. It was just like a day before David's return from his own trip to Australia.
Okay. When you returned, did you notice anything out of the ordinary?
Yes, as a matter of fact, I did notice that the whiskey, some of it had been consumed, and the newspapers were missing as well. And I think the telephone had been used during the period I'd been away, so yeah.
Can you confirm that you saw these things and that it wasn't that my client told you that these things happened?
Oh no, because I did come back before him, so I noticed these things on my own.
At any point, did you decide to confront the defendant for these things?
No,
Okay.
I didn't think he was in my place.
Have you ever witnessed a similar event like this happening, whether before you met David or any time within the time that you've been with David and him being your landlord?
No.
While you tended to his cats, did he ever instruct you to collect his newspapers and put them aside, or was there just a mutual understanding that you would collect his newspapers for him?
Well, yes, if things are delivered to the house, I would normally just put them aside. Yeah.
Are you aware that David often publishes in the newspaper, or?
Oh yes, it's one of the things I know he does enjoy. So.
Just to re-emphasize that you watched over his house, I'm asking specifically the relationship that you had. Did he ever have to instruct you to do certain things while he was away, whether visiting family or anything like that?
When you say instructs?
As in, do specific things like don't touch this if you please, well, stuff like that.
Oh, well, I mean, I usually wouldn't touch people's things if they haven't asked me to. So he would, if he needed assistance with taking care of the cats, the plants, he would say, I need assistance with X, Y, Z.
Yeah.
But in terms of not touching his things, I think I just understand that this is my space and that's his space. So I wouldn't ordinarily touch his things if I didn't have to.
All right. No further questions.
Hi, Ife. Thank you for
Hi.
coming down today.
Thank you.
I've just got a few further questions for you as well. First of all, I just want to ask you, usually when David left you with the property, what responsibilities would he tend to give you?
So if he was going away and I was remaining behind, then I would be able to assist him with taking care of the plants and the cats.
And the cats, okay. Would he also be asking you to keep his house in a good condition, nice, clean and tidy?
Well, he wouldn't necessarily have to tell me that. I live there as well.
Okay.
So as part of being in the house, I would take care of things that needed taken care of.
Okay. Because I just want to confirm, because you mentioned here that you said that you will take care of everything when he's away. What would that contain of it? Take care of everything in the house?
Well, like I mentioned, I live in the house as well, so it will just be to maintain things as they should be.
Okay, that's fine. Now, in terms of the newspapers and the whiskey and the telephone, you mentioned that you came back before David and that you noticed that these things had happened, some things were missing. I want to ask how you noticed that the telephone had been used.
It wasn't in the place where it was before, so it seemed like it had been moved slightly.
Okay, okay, that's fine. And in terms of the newspapers, did David specifically instruct you that you should be, leaving the newspapers or moving them to a safe place?
I wouldn't say specifically, but when things come through the door, I would usually just, put them away, just so that they're not in the way when we're going out, in and out.
Into a safe place?
Yeah.
Okay, that's fine. And, the whiskey bottle that was consumed, did you have an understanding of the condition of this bottle, how expensive it was, or its importance to David?
Oh, well, I wouldn't say understanding, but it was pretty obvious that was a special one for him.
Just a bottle first, okay, that's fine. I also just want to ask you, in terms of David's publishing in the newspaper, was your awareness of his publishing something that he communicated to you, or did you read the newspaper as well and come across David's name in there?
Well, I'm not sure which happened first, but I would say both, because I had noticed his article before, and it was something he'd mentioned in the past as well.
Okay, that's fine. And just for my client, I just want to know, do you have any relationship with my client? Do you know of her?
Yes, she's a neighbour down the road.
And what would you say about her? What do you know about her already?
I just know she's a good neighbour. We all have a cordial relationship. It's a nice neighbourhood where we live.
Okay, thank you. No further questions, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you. And in re-examination. I have one. You mentioned that the whiskey was obviously special. Could you elaborate on that slightly, please?
Well, the fact that he puts it in a different position from the rest was an indication, and I'd never really noticed him drinking from it
Okay.
since I moved into the property.
Would that be obvious to somebody that didn't live in the house?
Well, for someone who didn't live in the house, I wouldn't expect them to be going towards the whiskey because it wasn't just lying around.
Right.
It was in the drinks, but because I live there.
But if you were in the whiskey cabinet, so if the whiskey cabinet was open, would it be obvious to any passing person that that one was particularly special?
Well, they'll say it's standing by itself, so I don't know what it would mean to them.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
You may sit down. Thank you. Very good, thank you. Those are the two witnesses for the prosecution, so we turn to our defence to call your witnesses, please.
Call the accused, Mrs. Franza.
Thank you. If you could take the stand, please. Thank you very much. Remain standing while you are sworn in.
I'll swear you in again for the
Oh,
purposes of this
sorry.
session.
I, Franzanne,
Do solemnly, sincerely and truly declare
do solemnly, sincerely and truly declare
and affirm that
and affirm that
the evidence I shall give
the evidence I shall give
shall be the truth,
shall be the truth,
the whole truth,
the whole truth,
and nothing but the
and
truth.
nothing but the truth.
Thank you. You may be seated.
Thank you. I've forgotten you've been sworn in already. Sorry. Delay.
Hello, Mrs. Sun. I'd just like to kick this off by just first asking you to introduce to the court what it is that you do.
Well, I'm recently retired. I was previously a journalist.
Okay. How long have you been retired?
Just a few months, really.
Just beginning to enjoy your retirement.
Yes, yeah.
That's fine. Now, I would like to begin by asking you, what is your relationship with Mr. David Saint?
Oh, well, we've a very close relationship. We live in the same street, and every Friday we take it in turns to host a game of cards at our respective houses.
And how long have you known Mr. Saint for?
Oh, well, since as long as I've lived there, so, we've been friends for years.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's fine. And I just want to ask you now whether you have previously been given the responsibility of looking after someone's home.
Well, I'm always happy to help out with my neighbours, and yes, I'll always do whatever people ask, really. And previously I worked from home, and with me being retired, I've got lots of time to help friends and neighbours out.
Have you had any issues with any previous neighbours?
No. As I say, it's a friendly neighbourhood, and we had these regular games of cards. Yeah.
Okay, that's fine. Now, I just want to ask you now, just going on to the newspapers first.
Right.
At the time when you took the newspapers, can you just please elaborate to the court what was going through your mind, what you were thinking?
Well, obviously I'd gone round to the house to look after the cats as requested, and saw that there was a newspaper there, so he'd obviously perhaps forgotten to cancel his subscription. Why would you want sort of old newspapers lying around? So I thought, well, and sometimes again people may think if there's a sign of post lying around that someone's not around and easier to perhaps break into the property or something. So I thought, well, I'd take it, read it, keep it out of the way.
Did you do this with each of the newspapers that came through the post?
I did, yes, yeah.
Okay. Now, in terms of the house, did you take anything else from the house, or did you clean anything else, move anything else around in the house?
No, I mean, I must admit, I have a son who's got health bouts of depression he suffers from, and so I'm often concerned about him. And when I was sort of busy round at David's, I thought, oh well, nice and quiet, I'd maybe give him a ring and see how he was doing, and try and check on and lift his spirits really. I like to maintain contact with him. I mean, to be fair, I didn't think there would be a charge with me ringing from David's landline.
Did you have your mobile phone with you at that time?
No, I'd left it. I tended to leave it at home. Yeah.
Okay. I just want to ask, in terms of your own subscription, your own landline subscription, do you have 3 minutes as part of your own subscription?
Oh, do you know, it's so long since I've renewed everything. I'm not quite sure. I mean, I think you can have these friends and family named, can't you? I thought I'd done that.
And in terms of, I just want to ask, because you must have had your landline package for quite a bit of time.
Yeah.
Over the years, do you tend to always have this same kind of package where you have this friends and family minutes included?
Well, yes, it seemed, a good thing, and I think that's the sort of package that I had.
And would you say that you believe that this is typical across most landline packages?
Leading question.
Rephrase. Sorry, I'd say, in terms of landline packages, what's your understanding of landline packages?
Well, I guess there are different ones, and people are always ringing up to try and change things, aren't they? And I guess sometimes you can have free calls abroad, if that's relevant. But obviously, my son just lives in Brighton, so I wouldn't have had that one.
Okay. Now, in terms of the whiskey bottle and when you went and drank from the whiskey bottle, please can you explain to the court what you were thinking when you went up to the drinks cabinet and did this act?
One of the days when I was speaking to my son, he was very upset, and I was feeling really quite upset about it all. And so I thought, well, maybe just a little drink might help. And David often, shares drinks with us when we're there around his house playing cards. So I didn't think he would mind.
Okay.
So I just took the nearest bottle and had a drink out of that.
You mentioned that David usually shares drinks with you. Which kind of drinks does he share with you? I know there's a variety of drinks, I think, in his drinks cabinet, and he usually shares something from there with us. Okay. Please can you explain the makeup of the drinks compartment, if you try to recall when you went up to it?
Well, yes, I think it was a glass, a cabinet with various bottles in and, on different shelves.
Did you assume that you had David's permission to do this?
Well, I didn't think he would mind, knowing, as I say, how we're close friends, and that was upset, and that we often, he often lets us and shares drinks with us when we go around to his house, as we do, when they come to other people's.
Would you say you had the same kind of feeling when you took the newspapers and used the telephone? You said that you wouldn't mind in your mind?
Well, yes. I mean, the newspapers, I was just trying to keep things tidy, and thought he would have cancelled his subscription. And again, the drinks, I didn't think he would have minded.
Okay. No further questions, Your Honour.
Okay, thank you. Yes. Yes.
Any questions?
Yes, please. Yes, thank you.
So you said you were recently retired. Was that during the time that you're watching over David's cats and plants, or?
No, before.
Oh, before. Okay. All right. You also mentioned in the cross-examination that because the newspapers were left out, that it might be prone to someone breaking into the property because of it being left out and looking unattended to. Is the area that you and my client live known to have a lot of crime, or why would you suspect that to happen?
Well, it's just a common thing, isn't it? People, if you forget to cancel your milk or something and bottles of milk are left out, that can just be an indication someone's not at the property. I don't think it's a particularly high crime area, but it's everywhere these days, isn't it?
Understandable. Did you ever previously watch my client's home, like on any other occasion other than December of 2021? Watch his cats and plants.
Well, I've known the cats for a long time. I've known them since they were cheeky little kittens, and they're quite feisty beasts now. So I've known them a long time, and you know. But we haven't. I wouldn't say I've particularly been asked to watch them before, but obviously I'm familiar with them going round every week, or taking in turns when we go around. Yeah.
Okay. I'd like to ask: were you aware that my client, Mr. Saint, often published into the newspaper, or did you not have any awareness of that?
No, I didn't know that particularly. No, I mean I knew his accountant. Yeah.
When my client approached you about the missing things, the telephone bill, the whiskey bottle, and then how did he said that you were defensive about it? Why did you react in that way when he confronted you about it?
Well, I was just, obviously we've been friends for years. He's a bit like a brother to me, really. So I was, so surprised when he was calling me a thief. We're just friends. We've shared things in the past before. So, yeah.
Did you ever offer to pay for the telephone bill or replace the whiskey bottle when he confronted you?
I mean, if he'd have asked me, I would obviously have considered that.
No, so you didn't offer?
I don't recall that I did specifically. As I say, I was just surprised he was calling me a thief.
All right. No further questions.
Thank you.
I've just got one further question on it. Just in terms of the newspapers, did Mr. Saint specifically express the importance to you of these newspapers and why he feels they are so important to him?
No.
He did not leave you any instructions?
Specific
whatsoever?
Instructions, no. No, I just thought he'd forgotten to suspend them or cancel them whilst he was on holiday, and didn't want there to be clutter there.
No further questions.
Just one. You did liken them to letters and post as part of your evidence to your defence. Is that correct? Did I hear you correctly? You likened the newspapers to be delivered as though it was somebody's post.
Well, yes.
Okay, yes. But you wouldn't think to take the post or the letters, but you can
Well,
separate
I'd probably have collected them up so they weren't, lying around, so that if somebody either saw them, that they would think, oh, that person's not here tidying things up.
Okay, yep, no, I just wanted to clarify that point, yeah. Okay, thank you very much. You may return to your seat.
Your Honour, the defence would like to call Al Arson.
Okay, thank you very much.
If you could confirm your full name to the court, please.
Ali Alson.
And your address, please.
Number 5, Coronation Street.
Right, okay. If you could repeat these words after me. I, Ali Alson,
I, Ali Alson,
do solemnly, sincerely and truly
do solemnly, sincerely and truly
declare and affirm that the evidence that I shall give
that the evidence that I should give
shall be the truth,
the whole truth,
and nothing but the truth. Right, thank you. You may be seated. Your witness.
Good afternoon, Miss Arson. How are you doing today?
Okay, thank you.
Miss Arson, can you please first confirm to the court what it is that you do for a living?
I'm an IT consultant.
That's fine. And can you please explain what your relationship is with the accused, Miss Franson?
Yeah, well, she's my friend, and we've been neighbours for 5 years. I've known her for several years as well.
Okay. How long have you been friends?
5 years since I moved to the Coronation Street.
Okay, that's fine. And please, can you just explain to the court, because you mentioned that in your witness statement that she has tended to your house before. Please, can you give us details of what the responsibilities that you gave to her?
So I've got a cat called Whiskers who I'm very fond of. Every year I go to Pakistan on work trips twice a week, and I ask Al to look after my for my cats. She looks after the cats really well, cleans up, feeds them as well. When I return, the house is tidy, and she also makes me food as well, especially like pies.
Okay. And why is it that you choose to leave your house in the responsibility of...
I trust her.
And why would you say that is that you trust her?
Because my house is always tidy and she's not touched anything at all in the house. Just the tidying up and look after the cat.
Okay. What would you say of Mrs. San's character if you were to explain her to someone that she's never met before?
Very honest and loyal and friendly.
Okay. Have you ever had your house taken care of by anyone else before, or do you just leave it to
I leave it to
Mrs. San?
Yeah.
And how often is it that you leave it to her?
Well, whenever I go on holidays, I always leave it to her for 2 weeks.
Okay. And in terms of the responsibilities exactly that you give to her, is it just the cats or is it the full house that you expect her
Well,
to
it's the
look after?
cats. It is the cat. But also, she tidies up the house as well. She does that as a favour, so yeah.
Okay. No further questions, Aaron.
Okay, thank you.
The prosecution would like to ask a few questions. In the cross-examination, you said cats. Do you have multiple cats? Or
Just one cat, sorry.
So you also mentioned that she's never touched anything while she watched over your cat. Did you ever instruct her not to, or was there just like an understanding that
It's just an understanding. I mean, I trust her, but it's just that she cleans up, puts food out for my cat, cleans the litter as well, and tidies up as well.
Understandable. Did you have any subscriptions like newspapers and magazines delivered to your property while you had Miss Brand watch over?
No.
Oh, you didn't. All right. Was there ever an incident where Miss San had touched something that you did not give her any sort of approval to move around or tamper with?
No.
Never. Okay. You also mentioned that she baked food. Would she use your ingredients or would she bring it from home?
She would bring it from home, or she'd use mine as well. But I have no problem with that.
Did you ever see anything wrong with her using your ingredients the few times that she did?
No.
No. All right. No further questions.
No further questions, Your Honour.
Okay, so she would use your things to bake cakes, pies, and
Yes.
that's what you were saying?
Yeah.
Okay, but that you were happy about this?
Yes, I'm happy about
Okay,
that.
but that hadn't been previously determined or discussed or...
Well, we've got a mutual agreement as well, in a way.
Okay.
So if I'm away, she tidies
mutual
up and
understanding?
Yeah, mutual
It wasn't-
understanding. Yeah.
Okay, it
So
wasn't
she would
discussed?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. That's interesting. I could just check one thing as well. You said you go to Pakistan twice a week?
Twice twice a week. In a year, for 2 weeks.
Twice in a... Okay,
Yes,
right. I was
yeah.
thinking it was a long commute. Okay, thank you. Right.
That's fine.
Very well. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, you may sit back down.
Your Honour, that is the case on behalf of the defence.
Okay, thank you. Well, before I direct the jury as to how they find this case, I invite the prosecution to give us your closing statement, please.
Thank you, Your Honor. Your Honor and members of the jury, my client came here today to seek justice. From the evidence that has been presented in today's trial, it should be obvious to you that property belonging to my client, Mr. Saint, had been tampered with. It is not a question of whether or not this is true, as the defendant admitted to committing such acts. If there is a question whether to excuse people based on the relationship you have with them, we would definitely not be here today. When my client looked for the prosecution today, he had in hopes to receive compensation for the things that he had, for the items that he had either had been taken or had been tampered with. The defense may sway you to believe that there is no malicious intent or that the intention of the defendant was not to permanently deprive. However, the prosecution would like to usher you to think otherwise. Ask yourselves, would you ever be fined to, whether a friend or a family member, to watch your cats and plants, or to sit your house in general? Would you be fined to find items that were not previously mentioned? There was some sort of notification or alertion that this would be happening. Would you ever excuse them from the possibility of being confronted with theft in a court of law? If you also believe that this is wrong and that my client did not deserve to have his property be tampered with, then I usher you to believe that the defendant is guilty of the Theft Act in reference to the Theft Act of Section 1 of the Theft Act of 1968. Thank you. That's the case for the prosecution.
Okay, thank you. To our defence for your closing statement.
Members of the court and honourable members of the jury, the defence would have you believe that Mrs. Fransan, an honourable member of the community who the court has seen is a very trusted member of the community, who in her long time that she has been in this community has never had any problems with her neighbours before, has built long-lasting relationships with her neighbours. They would have you believe that today she is guilty of the crime of theft. Now, members of the jury, I just want to express this point upon you. For you to convict Mrs. San for the crime of theft, it is necessary that she has the requisite mental state to make up the crime of theft. And for that to occur, there both needs to be dishonesty and an intention to permanently deprive. If either of these elements are missing for either of the three charges that we've heard, the telephone, the whiskey, the newspaper, you cannot convict Mrs. Fransan. So I want to go through each of these with you just in turn, just to make this point clear. Let us begin first with the newspapers and Mrs. Fran's mental state with regards to the newspapers. We have heard from Mrs. San, we have heard from the witnesses, we have heard from the accuser himself that there was no express relationship and no express understanding where Mr. Sain expressed upon Mrs. San that she was not to touch the newspapers. And there was no express communication of the importance of these newspapers to Mr. Sain and of his publishing of these newspapers. Now, I'd like to draw the attention of the court and the attention of the jury to Section 2, subsection 1b of the Theft Act, which states that if the defendant has a genuine belief that the defendant would have the consent of the other, then there can be no theft. And in that same sense, I want to just express upon the court, following the case of the Crown and Holden, that there is no need for any reasonableness in regards to the exceptions under Section 2. Simply, if the defendant has a genuine belief that she believes that she would have the consent of the accuser, then there can be no dishonesty. Now, if we move on to the usage of the telephone. Now, Mrs. San, she has expressed upon to the court her understanding of landline contracts and that her understanding that usually there are some 3 minutes included within. I want to just draw reference to Mrs. Fran's experience here, because when it comes to dishonesty, experience is a very important factor. When it comes to the test for dishonesty now, it is of course been reformed under the Ivy test to bring the civil and criminal test together. And where the civil test comes from is the case of Royal Brunei Tan Airlines. Now, if we look at that case, there is express reference to the experience and intelligence of the person. Now, if we look at Mrs. Fran's experience here, her experience is that there is usually 3 minutes within a telephone contract. So she has genuinely believed that because most contracts that she has had experience with have had these 3 minutes incorporated, that on the few occasions that she did use the telephone of Mr. Saint, that she sincerely believed that she would be using 3 minutes and not be charged for these minutes. And if we go and apply the IV test to this specific situation now, we have to first ascertain her actual state of mind. And if we look to the case of Ivy, we have again been drawn to the case of, the person that comes to the UK and he uses public transportation in the thinking that public transportation is free because he's come from a country where that is all that he has ever known. I say that we should draw reference to this case and look at Mrs. Fran's state of mind, and because from the landline contracts that she has had experience with, she has always had 3 minutes in her contracts. So applying her state of mind and getting an objective, an ordinary, decent person to look at that and say someone who has always had 3 minutes in their contracts would assume that there'd be some 3 minutes in another contract cannot be dishonest. Now, I'd like to also just touch upon the whiskey bottle. Now, in the whiskey bottle, we have heard from the court how this whiskey bottle is in a compartment, how this whiskey bottle is in a slightly different area of the compartment, how it is slightly separate from the other drinks bottles. But we've also heard from the accuser, Mr. Saint, how he would openly invite his guests, his friends, and openly offer them beverages. And he did not necessarily impart upon Mrs. Fransan the importance of that whiskey bottle compared to each and all of the other beverages. He also mentioned that if she needed some water, if she was thirsty, that he would be happy for her to have some water. In a similar way, and I believe that Mrs. Fran, she believed that in her state of mind at that time, she was in distress, and she believed that because of the relationship that she had with Mr. Saint, that he would have consented to her having a small drink from the whiskey bottle. But I also want to stress upon the point for the whiskey bottle with the intention to permanently deprive. If we look to the case of the Crown and Lloyd, in that case, it was stressed to the court that the goodness and the whole virtue must be displaced, must be disposed of, must be gone. I would say that in this case, the fullness, the whole virtue of the whiskey bottle has not gone, because Mrs. San has only drank a small portion of the bottle. She only had a small glass. And we have heard from the accuser that the bottle is not an investment. If the bottle was an investment, there would be an argument that the fullness, the virtue of the bottle has gone because the resale value of the bottle would be depleted. But in this case, Mr. Saint, he says he wants to save the bottle for a momentous occasion. I implore to the members of the jury that that bottle, it can still be used for that occasion. If only a small glass was taken by Mrs. San, I believe that the virtue remains. If Mr. Saint wants to use this for another momentous occasion, he's still able to do so. He can still crack that bottle open and still offer this bottle to his guests. Members of the jury, you have heard from the witnesses, you have heard from the prosecution, you have heard from Mrs. San herself. This honourable member of the community, I implore you, please, find her not guilty after all the evidence has been taken into consideration. Your Honour, that is the case of the defence. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, so yes, I'll try to be brief with this, but just in terms of the job for the jury, thank you for joining us in this trial and for performing your civic duty in this matter to adjudicate over the matter of Fran San's accused theft. Now, as our defence quite capably pointing out the relevant law here is Section 1 of the Theft Act of 1968. That is the dishonest appropriation of property belonging to another with the intention of permanently depriving that person of that property. Okay. In that sense, yes, we have to determine all 5 elements of that theft, of the definition of theft, in order to be able to properly convict the defendant in this situation. Now, we didn't hear very much in terms of whether or not the physical act of the theft is in question, apart from whether or not the goodness or the value or the virtue of the whiskey bottle has now gone. We didn't hear similar arguments with regards to the newspapers or what have you. Now, if those arguments were persuasive to you in terms of whether or not a £200 bottle of whiskey, if the value of goodness of that has not gone simply because Mr. Saint's intention was to save it for a special occasion, then that's up to the jury to determine that in their own mind. The value of it, as an intrinsic thing, may well be something that the jury would want to consider separately. Now, in terms of the other elements, so by and large, I think the defence is quite clear that the physical act of the theft, that the appropriation of the property belonging to another, has indeed happened. The jury then is invited to consider whether or not it was done with the requisite, what we call in criminal law, mens rea, which is done dishonestly with the intention to permanently deprive the other person of their property. It's quite correct. In 2017, the definition of this was changed somewhat. So I'm required to give the jury the direction as to what was determined in Ivy and Genting casinos of 2017. That is, the fact-finding tribunal, that in our case being our jury, must first ascertain that the actual subjective state of the individual's knowledge or belief as to the facts. We've heard the facts today in the court. The reasonableness or otherwise of this belief is a matter of evidence, which you've heard in terms of the questioning of Fran San, which goes to whether or not that defendant had that belief, but is not an additional requirement that her belief must be reasonable. The question is whether it is genuinely held. Once this actual state of mind as to the knowledge or belief as to the facts is established, the question whether or not Fran San's conduct was honest or dishonest is to be determined by the jury, applying the objective standards of ordinary decent people. There is no requirement that the defendant must appreciate that what Fran San had done is, by those standards, dishonest. So it is up to the jury to determine, from the point of view of that defendant, or when we've established what those facts are, whether or not that belief that they could help themselves to the whiskey was honestly held or otherwise, whether or not tidying up the newspapers, which I think was the evidence that we heard, was genuinely held, that was acceptable, and indeed use of the telephone, which we didn't hear a huge amount about by way of evidence, but yeah, it's up to the jury, to you as the jury, to determine whether or not you believe that that was dishonest in terms of the appropriation of that property belonging to Mr. David Saint. Okay, so it is over to the jury then to determine these things, and we look forward to hearing your assessment of these matters.
Thank you.
Are we live? Oh, sorry.